Warning, this episode is not for the faint of heart. Viewer discretion is advised.
I was going to eat his heart. That's what I did. It was revenge, but I didn't swallow.
It's a fact that a spoon was found in the victim's brain.
He not only liked eating the flesh of these children, but drinking their blood.
And he said I did the most horrendous crime in the whole wide world.
Not true?
I guess not. All they were was shot and left.
From extreme violence to cannibalism to unspeakable acts that will make you sick to your stomach, today we're looking at some of the world's deadliest inmates. While some have higher kill counts than others, every single one of them will make you question how a human is possibly capable of what these inmates have done. Which inmate was known for attacking prison guards naked? Why did an inmate attempt to revive people after killing them? And how did one victim survive an inmate's massacre that killed 8 others?
To be honest, I don't have any remorse about who I killed. They were people who weren't worth a damn.
Pedro Rodrigues Filho, nicknamed Pedrino Matador, was either a serial killer or a vigilante, depending on who you ask. Born on a farm in Brazil, he took his first life at just 14 years old, killing a local politician who fired his father from a security job after accusing him of stealing food from a school cafeteria. He then killed the man he believed was the real culprit. After his pregnant fiancée at the time was killed by a gang, Pedro and a few friends went on a massacre, killing 7 members and injuring another 16 at a wedding reception. He was first arrested in 1973 at 18 years old and was sentenced to 126 years in prison. Mainly targeting drug traffickers, rapists, murderers, and other criminals, Pedro did most of his killing well behind bars. Yeah, this man was on a mission. While incarcerated, Pedro murdered more than 40 inmates, but he saved the worst for his father, who was imprisoned for killing his mother. What he did to his dad was revenge on a whole other level.
I cut out a piece of his heart. I chewed because I had said I was going to eat his heart. That's what I did. It was revenge, but I didn't swallow. I chewed and threw it over the body.
Despite his heinous crimes, Pedro was released from prison in 2007 due to a loophole at the time in Brazil's laws that didn't allow inmates to be locked up for more than 30 years. In 2011, he was charged and arrested for threatening people, illegal weapons possession, and illegal rioting. In 2018, he was re-released and seemed to turn a corner. He launched a YouTube channel warning people against crime. Pedro was also the inspiration for the book-turned-TV series Dexter. But in March 2023, his dream of stardom faded when he was shot and killed by 2 unknown men. No arrests have been made. Even though he chewed his father's heart, Pedro wasn't considered a cannibal. Our next inmate, however, was nicknamed Hannibal the Cannibal.
They brought him into a cell, shut the door, and they then proceeded to torture him for 9 hours.
Robert Maudsley was born in Liverpool, England, and from a very young age endured abuse from his father. While working as a sex worker in London in 1974, Maudsley strangled a client to death who showed him photos of a child he had abused. He later turned himself in. Deemed unfit for trial, Maudsley was sent to Broadmoor Hospital in 1977, where he killed again. This murder is what led to his infamous nickname, Hannibal the Cannibal.
Maudsley tore this man apart. He smashed open his head, and it's a fact that a spoon was found in the victim's brain. So Maudsley said he did not use that spoon to eat his brain, but the spoon was lodged there.
Why lodge a spoon in his brain? It doesn't matter. Maudsley was moved to Wakefield Prison in 1978, where he killed another 2 inmates. Thankfully, no spoon was found in their brains. He was then transferred to solitary confinement to endure his life sentence in complete solitude. All of his victims were sex offenders. In his last murder trial in 1979, Maudsley admitted that he believed in his mind that his victims were his parents. It was his way of dealing with the trauma from a childhood of constant abuse. A 2-cell unit was built specifically for Maudsley in 1983. It eerily resembles the unit in the 1991 film The Silence of the Lambs. To date, he spent 46 years in solitary confinement, earning him the record for longest-serving prisoner in those conditions in the history of the UK. Some sources dub him Britain's most violent prisoner, but that title may go to our next inmate. Charles Bronson, born Michael Gordon Peterson, is one of Britain's most violent and notorious inmates. Born in Bedfordshire, England, Bronson started with petty crimes at 13 years old, but didn't face any jail time until 1974, when the then 22-year-old was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 7 years. Throughout his first stint in prison, Bronson was transferred to numerous prisons and psychiatric hospitals, gaining a reputation for his extreme violence. From attacking inmates and guards to breaking out of his cell and rioting on prison rooftops, Bronson had his sentence extended until 1987, when he was finally released. Upon his release, Bronson, who was back using his Michael Peterson birth name at the time, started to fight in illegal bare-knuckle boxing matches. His fight promoter encouraged him to change his name, which he did. Now, before we knock out the rest of Charles Bronson's violent history, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible survival stories. Just over a year after his release, Bronson was yet again locked up for armed robbery. In 1989, he made a makeshift spear with a broom and a broken bottle and ran around his cell naked. Okay, wow, I would not want to be this guy's cellmate. Luckily for the other inmates, the actions of the heavily armed guards led to Bronson's surrender and no one got hurt. Bronson was released again in '92 and, after a few months, was back to his old ways. He was found guilty of intent to rob, as well as possession of a shotgun, and was sentenced to 8 years. He's been in the slammer ever since. In 2014, he infamously greased himself up with butter and ran around naked after his least favorite soccer team won a championship game. When the guards tried to apprehend him, he fought back, calling it the rumble of his life. To no surprise, he lost and broke some ribs during the scuffle. While in prison, Bronson has held nearly a dozen people hostage, including inmates and visitors. This led to him receiving a life sentence. Although he's technically never killed anyone, his violent outbursts and attempts at murder make him a risk to the public. It goes without saying that you'd want to avoid anyone on this list, but our next inmate seemed to kill out of pleasure.
Panzram was arrested for a housebreaking charge, relatively minor. And when the police brought him in, he said, "This is a very small charge. I've committed numerous murders over the years. This is nothing."
Carl Panzram was born in 1891, just outside of Minnesota. Raised on a farm in an abusive household, he began with petty crimes at just 8 years old. At 11, he burned down a reform school where the staff abused him. When he was 16, Panzram decided to join the military, but was caught stealing and sentenced to 3 years in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. After being released, he traveled across the US, parts of South America, and Europe, engaging in criminal activity including assault and robbery, while using multiple aliases. Panzram didn't start killing until 1920, after he robbed the home of William Howard Taft, a former US president. His haul included jewelry, bonds, and a pistol. With the money, Panzram bought a yacht and lured local sailors on board one at a time. He'd get them drunk, have his way with them, then kill them. Sadly, this was just the start. He continued his sadistic behavior in Africa. Panzram hired 6 men for a fake job, only to kill and feed them to crocodiles. Once he returned to the US, he continued his spree until his final arrest in 1928, when he was given life in prison. While there, he murdered a guard with an iron bar and was sentenced to death. Our next inmate will give you nightmares about going to the hospital.
Well, former nurse Niels Högel is already serving life imprisonment after being convicted of the murder and attempted murder of 6 patients who were in his care when he worked in a hospital near the city of Bremen between the years of 2000 and 2005.
Born in Germany in 1976, Niels Högel is known as the serial killer nurse and is serving life in prison for his crimes. He started in the cardiac surgery unit of a German hospital's ICU in 1999. In 2001, doctors held a meeting after there was a noticeable rise in resuscitations and deaths, with Högel on duty during more than half of the incidents. In 2002, Högel transferred to another clinic, where medical emergencies or deaths involving high blood pressure or heart failure spiked. To no surprise, Högel was again on duty when the majority of these incidents happened. On June 22, 2005, Högel was caught in the act of injecting a patient with a drug known to cause cardiac arrest. He was arrested that summer, but the gruesome details wouldn't be revealed until years later. In 2008, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder. But the families of other suspected victims pushed for further investigations, which exposed the sad truth. In 2015, Högel admitted to murdering at least 6 patients, and then went on to claim he killed another 30 by lethal injection. He was sentenced to life in prison. His reasoning? Boredom, and to show off his ability to resuscitate people. Yeah, this guy is sick. Just 4 years later, authorities discovered he was actually responsible for killing 85 patients. However, investigators believe that number could really be as high as 200. Taking us back to the United States, this inmate is one of America's most famous female serial killers.
You killed 7 men, 7 strangers. Does that not make you a serial killer?
So I didn't kill them every day, did I?
Aileen Wuornos was born in Michigan in 1956 and came from an abusive household. It seems to be a common theme among a lot of the inmates on our list. Working as a prostitute to support herself and her drug addiction, Wuornos was arrested a handful of times in the 70s for robbery and auto theft.
She was being arrested for driving under the influence, for assault and battery, for robbery.
However, her most significant crimes happened between 1989 and 1990. In 1 year, she was responsible for robbing and killing 7 men and dumping their bodies on the side of the road. Pretending to be a hitchhiking sex worker throughout Florida, the men would pick her up and then fall victim. Once she was arrested, Wuornos claimed she acted in self-defense, but the victims' gunshot wounds proved otherwise. Some were shot multiple times. In 1992, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Shortly after, she admitted to 3 more murders and claimed she did so for profit, not in self-defense. On October 9th, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. She was only the 2nd woman in Florida to be executed since the state restored the death penalty in 1976. Fun fact, Charlize Theron played Wuornos in her 2003 Oscar-winning performance in the film Monster. Our next inmate might encourage you to invest in better home security.
All week long, we have been showing you some disturbing images of the mass murderer. We heard Speck confess and show absolutely no remorse for his heinous crimes.
Richard Speck was born in Kirkwood, Illinois in 1941. Suffering abuse at the hands of his alcoholic stepfather, he turned to alcohol himself in his early teens. His first arrest came at just 13 years old, and over the next 8 years, he was in and out of jail for petty crimes. But the worst of his crimes occurred in 1966, starting with robbing and sexually assaulting a 65-year-old woman. It's believed he killed another woman shortly after. Police questioned him regarding the murder, but he wasn't arrested. Afterward, he fled to Chicago. On July 13th, 1966, Richard Speck broke into a townhouse, which was home to 9 female nursing students. And the details of his massacre are absolutely brutal. While holding the students in a room for hours, he led them out one by one and killed them. His method of murder was either stabbing them, strangling them, or both. He also forced himself onto one of the victims before killing her. In total, Speck killed 8 of the 9 students, with the only one surviving by hiding under a bed and waiting for Speck to leave before calling for help. On April 15th, 1967, Richard Speck was sentenced to death, but that was changed to a 100-year sentence in 1972. Initially claiming he was drunk and high during the massacre, he later admitted he would have done the same thing sober. While imprisoned, Speck died of a heart attack on December 5th, 1991. Of all the inmates on our list, this next one definitely has the scariest nickname, and for good reason.
He not only liked eating the flesh of these children, but drinking their blood, and that also gave him a feeling of great satisfaction.
Albert Fish was born in Washington, D.C. in 1870. He was also known as the Gray Man or the Boogeyman, and his horrific crimes are to blame. Obsessed with inflicting pain, both on himself and others, Fish was known to hit himself with a paddle covered in nails. He was found to have dozens of sewing needles inside of his body, mainly around his groin area. When he wasn't torturing himself, his victims, mainly children, would have to endure excruciating agony. Although an exact number was never confirmed, police believed he killed up to 15 children. In 1928, Fish, who was 58 years old at the time, tortured 10-year-old Grace Budd and sent a letter to her family describing his gruesome crimes. Guys, I'm not going to explain them here because they are absolutely horrendous. In 1934, Albert Fish was arrested and admitted to killing Grace and other children. He tried to plead insanity, claiming voices in his head told him to kill his young victims. Although numerous psychiatrists did claim he was insane, The jury didn't care, and Fish was sentenced to death by electric chair. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed at New York State's Sing Sing prison. Knowing what's going on around you, traveling in groups, and trusting your instincts are all good ways to avoid being a victim of a serious crime. Of course, every situation is unique, but I'd say these tips are a good place to start. Well, that does it for me. Pretty messed up if you ask me. But if you want to learn more about terrifying inmates, check out our video on South America's toughest prisons. We'll see you next time on How to Survive.